following is a presentation of the iRacing Esports Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to V8 Online's coverage of round number 5 of this 2018 Season 3 Championship, streamed live on the iRacing Esports Network. Tonight we head to the mecca of elevation changes, sandy runoffs and overtaking opportunities as last night's V8 Supercars Online Premier Series proved with an almighty finish, and tonight's stacked lineup of drivers has every chance of going one better. I'm Bo Albert, and joining me in the commentator's booth as always is Mr. Zachary Hanlon, and bringing you all the live pictures is Mr. J.K. Kennedy. Remember, if you are watching tonight for the first time, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all the live racing action on the iRacing Esports Network from all your favorite broadcasters, including RaceSpot TV, LSR TV, and yours truly at V8 Online. But Zach, Laguna Seca is such a tough track, but one that is ingrained in the mind of so many drivers coming from MX5 rookies all the way to where they are now in the top split of V8 Supercars official championship. But tonight is going to throw up more food for thought than any MX5 race ever could, with a 50% fuel restriction, which means drivers will be needing somewhere between 28 and 35 litres, and the potential for tyres to become a little less than comfortable towards the end of the stint.
Yeah, absolutely. And as it is always with these V8 Supercars, so difficult to control and so difficult to get the power down. And they're going to be using those tyres, even though we do have a very low track temperature night of just 20 degrees Celsius, which by standards is very, very low. So a lot of guys are going to be having to manage that, and also keeping in mind when they're going to want to come in and get those tyres on. There is usually a really large disparity in time the longer you go on the tyres. So we're seeing guys hopefully pitting around the midway mark of the race. And as we saw yesterday in the V8 Supercars Series, there was some fantastic racing. And I think with a lot of guys still being in a lot of very well practiced from yesterday, I think they'll be putting all that knowledge to good use tonight.
Absolutely, and one driver that is doing that is Jared Filsell, current championship leader, currently holds the pole position ahead of longtime rival and driver that is not got a lot of practice from V8 Supercars, Josh Rogers, coming back into the V8 Supercar and immediately on the pace, just half a tenth of a second off pole position currently, with Sam Blacklock lining up third as well. So a lot of very quick drivers towards the front of the field on what is a very cool track, lining up at 20 degrees track temperature, so the drivers are punching out times so much quicker than they were last night, which is fantastic to see, as we still have a few drivers completing their second laps, including Scott Larnack, who makes the run out of the final corner and heads for the start-finish line to put himself from 31st on the grid to jump up to 21st. So a good effort there, and still has one more lap on the clock, but won't be able to get that in with the time remaining. Only 8 minutes to get your time in, and Scotty unfortunately just missing the mark a bit there, Zach.
Yeah, well, you got to make sure that you get all your bits together and make sure you have enough time to get everything done. And unfortunately for Scotty there, he's not managed to do it, but he's still continuing around, and he'll want all the practice that he can get, because even though he's been doing the other races this weekend, this track temperature is very cool, and it might not be something that he's quite accustomed to, and you've got to learn how the setup with the car you have works with those track conditions, because it can vary massively. You can make many different changes to the car based on the track temperature, and so he might, after this run, decide that the car's a little bit loose. It looks like, from what I'm seeing at the moment, the rear is stepping out quite a bit, so he might decide to go and soften up the rear bar or something like that. Obviously, they have things like that they can adjust on the fly as well to help, but with a big car grid of 32 cars tonight, he'll be wanting to make sure that he has that thing all the way tuned up so that he can make his way through from 21st, that's for sure.
Absolutely, but one driver not starting from 21st is Jared Filsell, who will kick things off from pole position tonight ahead of longtime rival Josh Rogers. Sam Blacklock lines up in P number 3 ahead of Jordan Ross on the second row of the grid, with Wayne Burke making it 2 Synergy Sim Racing cars in that top 5. Forza Nabi joins him on the third row of the grid with Stuart Vaughan, who is very, very lucky to make it back into the session after a bit of an issue in practice. And Thomas McMillan lines up in P8 with Brett Loxton and Cooper Webster, your top 10.
Yeah, then we've got Riley Blythe lining up in P number 11 alongside Corey Preston, number 12. Adam Hyland will start out of 13th next to Brian Borg in 14th position. Kyle Stokes in 15th with Matt Deere on the 8th row of the grid in 16th position. Steve Jansen in 17th. Benjamin J. Smith in 18th position. Jordan Pruden's going to start out of 19th, and Jacob Knight will round out your top 20. And then the rest of our 32 car grid tonight: Scott Larkin 21st, Christian Hinton 22nd, David Kinman 23rd, David Mulqueen in position number 24, Will Dodd in 25, and then Dominic Savicki, Jason Cossey, Pete Walsh, Shane Rayner, Martin Casey, Philip Piggott, and Brendan Jackson, the final car on the grid, who unfortunately didn't get to set a time, so he might have a bit of juice to get himself through the front of the field this evening.
Absolutely, the Velocity Sim Racing driver with a lot of work to do from that far down on the grid. So we'll wait and see what kind of charge he can put on through this 32 car field. Fantastic to see, with the strength of field over 3,000. So good points on offer for whoever walks away with this race win, which will be kicking off in just 10 seconds time. As the drivers line up on the grid, joining as late as they can to save as much fuel as possible. So fuel strategy already being played, but the time is over and the red lights will come on. A bit of a roll there on the start for Josh Rogers. Has to be careful. It is an uphill start. Hard to get the cars off the line, as they will do right now with the green flag in the air. We are away for 28 laps, and look at the start for Joshua Rogers on the power immediately, and already trying to mount an attack on Jared Filsell as we go 3 wide in the background, involving one of the ERT cars and a TTL car. They all funnel their way into the hard braking zone of turn number 1. Lockups aplenty, and a bit of hip and shoulder in the back as we have one car around. I think one of those cars was the Cross Continental Motorsports car. Also have Riley Blythe into the background as well. Corey Preston was that driver involved, as Forza Nabi cops a bit of a hit on the exit, as well as he goes side by side with one of the All-Star Motorsports cars. So a very rough start so far, but this circuit has a lot of overtaking opportunities, so they can't get too aggressive too early, but they're going to try it anyway. The number 10 car trying to make a move on Forza Nabi. Cooper Webster behind, also trying to mount an attack on Brett Loxton, who has not had a good start. Started in P number 9, and is falling back a little bit as one car in the background has a big off. Very lucky to hold out of the tyre wall there, trying to work out who that was. Christian Hinton having a big move, but the rest of our field makes their way to the corkscrew, Zach, and for the most part it has been clean, bar 1 or 2 cars.
Yeah, just been a little bit of hip and shouldering and a bit of front to rear contact, but nothing that's really done too much damage, other than Corey Preston, Riley Blythe having that little spin on the exit of turn 2 there, but mostly fine, and good to see these guys getting through the corkscrew pretty easily, as well as we've got a change up at the lead, or we've got a battle going, and Jared Filsell is now door to door with Josh Rogers, who's got the preferred line as they come down into turn number 1. Very late on the brakes is Filsell, trying to make a surge around the outside. He's going to have to hold it tough though, maybe try and do a little bit of an up and under, but unfortunately it doesn't look like he's quite got the traction speed out of there. Not going to shove it up at the inside of turn 3 there. So very nice job from Josh getting through. And these guys starting, even with breaking away very quickly, already starting to pull a bit of a gap on Blacklock and Burke behind as well.
Yeah, they absolutely are, but if they continue to fight, that gap might just come down a bit. And from history, we know how much Filsell and Rogers love to scrap it out two of the best Australia will ever see, and if I must say, two of the best operators in the business, and they're going to fight it out for 28 laps here, and you know they're going to give everything they have. But the midfield is just as interesting as the drivers try and work their way around this very tricky circuit, which is very tough to get into a rhythm at times, especially with the elevation changes. But the car does change balance from lap to lap occasionally as the fuel wears out. But fortunately, with the low track temperature we have, grip should be at a premium here today, which is fantastic for racing. And drivers are really using that in the opening few laps. Rogers will lead lap number 2 as he begins to pull out a little bit of a margin now, but there's still a very big battle pack behind, with Sam Blacklock leading it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And Forzan El Nabi actually just had a slowdown and had to give up a bunch of positions. He's lost 9 spots from his starting position already. So a bit of a catastrophe there, and he's going to have a lot of work to do to make himself back up. As just behind him, David Kinman looking to make a move on Christian Hinton there and doing a good job keeping that car tight on both apexes and getting that move done. It's a very nicely colored machine there in the purple and bright green, looking very, very nice, getting that move done. But yeah, Sam Blacklock just falling off the pace a little bit compared to those up ahead of him. I mean, as you said, those guys are two of the best in the business, and they are arguably two of Australia's fastest sim racers in many, many disciplines. So very hard to keep up with those guys, but we have seen guys in this field do it many times before, but they've just gotten the jump there for the time being, and that's going to allow them to possibly, you know, as you said, they do like to battle a little bit, but I think both of those guys know that they need time to battle. So they might just spend the first little opening stint of this race following each other around, and then once they've got a little bit more of a gap, they might start turning on the fireworks a little bit, but we will wait and see. And just as I've said that, however, Phil Sell is looking very aggressive on the back of Josh Rogers there, and is actually going to pull to the outside line now. We'll see if he does the same thing. He went very deep under brakes, but he's going to not do that this time. Maybe try and carry a little bit mid-corner speed and try and get that straighter exit, which he does do. And now he might try and fire it down the inside of turn 3, but just a little bit too far back to really pull anything off at the moment. You can see, though, that Josh Rogers just running a little bit wide on the entry to some of these corners. And maybe that's due to the fact that he doesn't have as much practice as the rest of the field behind him. But as you can see, he does have a lot of pace right now.
Yeah, absolutely does, but not quite enough to get the fastest lap of the race. That was Phil Sell last time around, 1/10 of a second quicker, which with these two guys is a very, very large margin as they fire their way through a very tricky turn number 6 and head to the corkscrew, where moves can be made if you're very opportunistic or your name is Alex Zanardi. But for now, Jared Philsell just waits behind and waits for a later opportunity. And of course, you can fuel save a bit here today, and that is going to be crucial because you are going to need, at the bare minimum, 28 litres of fuel. And in these cold conditions, it might even be a little bit more, as you can spend more time on that loud pedal, which all of these drivers absolutely love to do. But nonetheless, everyone's still making their way around the circuit at the moment, apart from 2. Corey Preston and Ben Smith are your first 2 retirements, unfortunately, from this race. So a shame to see 2 cars gone already, but still 30 drivers making their way around this circuit. And one of them is Jacob Knight, who gets a very nice move up the inside of the final corner in that DuPont Holden Commodore. And that's going to allow Forzan El Nabi to have a shot as well on the inside of Steve Jansen. And that is not a place you want to be on the outside through that very small kink, because there's actually a very large dive in the background as well. That's Christian Hinton, who had an issue on the first lap, trying to make amends, and is so far doing it, but not on the exit. You don't. You come over too soon, and you get clipped and turn yourself around. Unfortunate for the 18, but I think that was all of his doing, just trying to squeeze on the exit. And the 17 car gave room, but he doesn't deserve to be on the gravel either.
No, that's unfortunate, but you know, I mean, when you make a mistake early on in the race and you've got to start taking positions, that's always a risk that you put yourself into. And unfortunately for Hinton there, it hasn't paid off, but David Kinman, still gets to circulate and will try and catch back up to this battle pack with Steve Jansen, Forzan El Nabi, who's looking very aggressive on Jacob Knight, who put in a good move before. And Forzan's got a lot of work to do as well. He's made up a couple of spots, but still very, very far down from where he qualified. So he's going to have to use canvas these corners to try and propel himself up through this field as he's going for a little bit of a dive into the final corner at turn number 11, and Jacob Knight just leaving the door nice and wide open for Forza, and they'll probably knows that that car's a little faster. He's just not going to make it too difficult so he doesn't become susceptible to an attack behind. So nice heads up driving from Jacob Knight there. There's a spin just ahead of them, and all the drivers managed to get past. That was Kyle Stokes just having a bit of a lazy half spin as he came just past the apex of turn number, what is actually technically number 2 there. So unfortunately for him, a couple of little mistakes early on in this race from a few drivers, and that's not what you want to see when you want to be making sure that you're as far up the grid as you can be at the end of this race.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of a surprise to see Kyle Stokes have a bit of an issue there, as he did have a very strong performance in Super Split 2 last night. So he knows the circuit very well, just unfortunately overcooking it in these tricky conditions at the moment. But just behind is a fantastic battle pack, including Will Dodd, who is under a lot of pressure from Scott Lineck, and Jason Cossey and Riley Blythe, who is on a charge at the moment, is trying to make some moves as well, as Cossey just has a bit of a look, gets into the back of Scott Lineck and almost turns around the TL Esports Commodore. Thankfully, they all keep her on their tracks, but Riley Blythe will dive down the inside on the long left-hander, but can't quite complete it. But now he does, as Jason Cossey just runs onto the gravel a little bit, which does affect your exit oh so much, as he finds out the hard way. But Riley Blythe doing a fantastic job in the Evolution Racing Team Falcon at the moment. He, of course, had that issue on the first lap, dropped to the very rear of the grid, already finding himself up 10 spots from that first lap incident, and looks very, very racy at the moment. We'll see what he does into turn number 1. Of course, he goes for the inside of Scott Lineck. A big move into turn number 2, essentially. But regardless of what you want to call it, 1 or 2, it's a position gained for Riley Blythe, and his charge continues.
Yeah, Riley Blythe, as we've said time and time again, I mean, he loves attacking and overtaking. So if there's one guy you pick to be able to make it through the field, it's going to be him. So long as nobody comes to grief between now and then, we will be all good. And he goes for another clean pass into turn number 5 and gets that done very, very nicely. And Will Dodd's going to just be a little bit held up because of that, and might be under attack from Scott Lineck here as he runs just a little wide on the mid corner there, and Scott getting a nice exit. He's going to try and fire it down the inside of the corkscrew. There's a little bit of contact. Scott then, very heads up driving from Riley, but it's not enough, unfortunately. And now there's a few cars that have come together. We've got one on its side even. My camera's just changed view, but yeah, one of the cars, Mulqueen, just went up on his lid for a moment on my screen there. And Riley Blythe now having all the more to do. And yeah, that was just a very unfortunate incident there. Scott Lineck just locking up a little bit as he came down into the corkscrew there. And Riley Blythe did see him coming and actually did make a little bit of an avoiding maneuver, tried to run a little wider at the apex of the first part of that, but it just wasn't enough and unfortunately got spun there. So after doing all that hard work, he's got to make his way through this battle pack all the way again.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so easy to lock a brake heading over that elevation change, because of course as you go for the brakes, the rear of the car is lifting, so it's very easy to swap hands. The two drivers that are not having any issues of the such are Josh Rogers and Phil Sell, who continue to build an enormous lead, 3 seconds now over Sam Blacklock and P number 3. So these top two definitely have a lot of space to play with right now, and a lot of strategy elements can come in because there's no pressure from behind. So you can attack on track if you wish, or you can save fuel. But we know Jared Philsell, he's going to attack on track if he gets any opportunity. And a few opportunities have came in the last few laps, but he just hasn't been quite close enough to get a move done. The gap over the start-finish line will stand at 0.3 of a second, but you can be sure that will ebb and flow over the next 20 laps in this race. And just while we do have a little bit of a lull in the action as the drivers run around, be sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the iRacing Esports Network, a fantastic new platform for all your favorite broadcasters. And if you do subscribe, you will get all of that action delivered right to your subscription box. So be sure to do that. But meanwhile, there is a very, very good race happening on track. And just looking for our next little battle to break free, which does seem to be happening almost every lap around Laguna Seca, as Brian Borg has Adam Highland for company at the moment, as they're battling their way through the long right-hander. And we'll see if any moves can come from that in the next few laps.
Yeah, there's a few little packs forming, and Riley Blythe's caught back up to Dominic Savicki now. So he's going to have a little bit of a go, I think, into turn number 5 here. Gets a really nice exit coming out of 4, the sweeping right-hander, and he's going to go up the inside at turn number 5, and job nicely done there. But he's lost a lot of time to the pack up ahead now. So even if Riley Blythe does make it through this next little pack of cars, there is a monumental gap. It's almost pretty much 10 seconds back up to the 12th position nearly. So he's going to have a lot to do from there. He's currently 31 seconds off the lead, and David Kinman in 15th even is 22 seconds off. So he's going to have to make up a lot of time there. But we'll now go to Forzan El Nabi, who is just going on the pit lane now. Forzan is someone who we have seen make alternate pit strategies before work for him, and having lost out early in the race, he might just be looking to get some fresh rubber on nice and early and some clean air and just smash a few laps out and get some track position later in the race, even though he might not have as much to fight with towards the end. If he can get those positions without having to overtake anybody, he may just be able to get up far enough that he doesn't have to worry about more drivers than he would have. So he comes out of the pits after a nice clean stop, and he will be the benchmark for the rest of our pit stops. So 13.8 seconds stop there for Forzan El Nabi was a total of 36 seconds in the pit lane inclusive of that. So have to look out in the gap. So the leaders could pretty much pit and come out almost at the back of the pack now if they wanted, but I suspect that they'll probably be pitting closer to the middle of the race, given that they don't have much to deal with from behind, and they'll just be wanting to battle each other. But little battle pack happening towards the back of the field, led by Philip Piggott right now, and driver in there, Pete Walsh, is starting to make his way through there and having a little bit of a look down the inside on Shane Rayner as they come down through turn number 9 there, and not quite able to make it work. These guys have been trading laps for the last, or trading lap times for the last few laps, and it's having a little battle down at the back of the pack there, but nothing wrong with battling down the back. As long as it's nice and clean and you're having fun, that's what we like to see.
Yep, absolutely, and they're having a brilliant scrap at the moment, which is awesome to watch, as Wayne Burke has completed his pit stop and will come out of that pit exit, which is very, very challenging because you actually can make a lot of time if you're feeling brave. And Wayne does come out quite a fair bit ahead of Forzan El Nabi, who's only coming to turn 1 now. So we have 2 benchmarks now for our race leaders and anyone else in the field to really see what is happening with pit stops and how much the delta in new tyres is, which I don't assume it would be too much at the moment with the cool track temperature, and still only being 11 laps into this race, about to be 12, as our 2 race leaders come for the start-finish line once again. Gap still stagnant, but you do have to wonder if these guys are saving fuel. As for P number 3, it is going to be down to the pit lane crews, as we have Sam Blacklock, we have Jordan Ross and Thomas McMillan, and a whole host of other drivers coming into the pit lane now. We've been seeing pit stops around the 14-second mark so far, so we'll wait and see if any of these guys are going to play it risky. Sam Blacklock definitely playing it risky on pit lane entrance. Very lucky to actually be scored in his pit lane box at the moment, and nonetheless maximizing that as much as he can. And we'll wait and see if any of these guys are feeling brave on the pit lane exit. Sam Blacklock gets rolling. He will hold that P number 3. A change though for P number 4, I believe, as Thomas McMillan gets a very, very short stop and will jump the driver of Jordan Ross. And a few of these guys actually going for a much longer stop. A lot of these guys around the 16-second mark, as Ross almost gets into the back of Thomas McMillan on the pit lane exit, which is so difficult to get out of, Zach.
Yeah, it's so deceptively slow, that pit exit, because turn essentially 1, we'll call it turn 1. Turn 1 is it's such a slow corner, and then the pit exit is even tighter. And I know the first time I go out in any car I haven't driven in a while, it's a bit weird. But Sam Blacklock now coming in under Wayne Burke and giving him a push through turn number 5 there, and Wayne Burke gets shot off the circuit and almost up onto his side as they came through there. So a bit of a hip and shoulder from Sam Blacklock as he came through, and that's job done for him. So where did Wayne...
Phil still in.
Oh, yep. So the leaders are starting to come in now, and I really thought that they would have held off a little bit longer. It's only been about, from what I can see, it's only about a half-second delta in the lap times for the new tires, which isn't as much as we would normally see. But the leaders deciding once everyone else has come in from behind, that's just too much of a risk, and they're going to both come in, or actually only fuel cells come in. So time for Rogers to get the hammer down and maybe go a couple of extra laps and try something different for him. But it does seem like the rest of the field mostly is coming onto the pit lane if they didn't in the last lap.
Yep, and you would have to assume that Rogers is going to be diving in this time around, and he's pushing extremely hard, locking the rears into the corkscrew. So we'll wait and see what Rogers does this time around. But very interested by the pit stop times. Of course, at the start, we thought 14 seconds would be the delta. Drivers around the 16-second mark now, so we'll wait and see if Forza and Al-Nabi will be okay on fuel, as we'd still have a few little battles happening on track. Martin Casey, one of those drivers who is under a lot of pressure from Cooper Webster, as Josh Rogers does indeed come into the pits, and Cooper Webster does indeed dive to the inside and gets that move done. But we'll keep our attention on the Rogers pit cell incident. Well, not incident, but drama, as they will come out of the pit lane. This time around, Phil Sell making his way through the long left-hander, just the 2 corners to go until he can finish this lap. And here we'll see Josh Rogers very slowly trundling out of that pit lane. It was 15.4 seconds for Phil Sell in the pit lane. What will Rogers do in the pit lane? Still waiting, 15.8, so it's 0.4 of a second slower. The gap was 0.4 of a second when they were on track. And all of a sudden, things are going to change because Josh Rogers comes through the pit lane exit, but it is a much slower turn 1 for Josh Rogers. Phil Sell all the way around the outside, but it's not going to be enough for Phil Sell. The overcut has worked for Rogers, and he has been able to extend that lead ever so slightly, Zach.
Yeah, Phil Sell actually got the tiniest bit of traffic on his outlap, and one of those cars was Steve Jansen, actually, who had a spin out of turn 3, but now Rogers has cold tires and Phil Sell has hot tires, and on this cooler track temp, it might take that little bit extra effort from Rogers to get those tires up to speed, and Phil Sell making it known that he wants him to get those tires up or let him through right now, because he's weaving all over the back of Rogers. And by now I would say that Rogers might just have enough tire temp to be going fully again. But Phil Sell looking to take different lines and looking for a way past. He's been hanging behind for about 14 laps now. And after this set of pit stops, it looks like he really wants to get to the front and start making a bit of a charge away.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, there's only so long you can look at the back of the livery before you start to get a little bit annoyed. And as good looking as the TTL livery is, I think Jared Phil Sell might be getting a little bit sick of it and wouldn't mind seeing it in his rear view mirror. But there's not going to be an opportunity into turn number 1, I don't think, very late on the brakes regardless. But we will wait and see if Phil Sell can do anything in the next few laps as the rest of our field does cycle through onto the pit lane, just cleansing it a little bit so we can get an effective running order of where everyone is. And Forza Al-Nabi is making a few positions from that very early pit stop, but fuel could very well be an issue for him as he now finds himself up in pit number 10. So nice little strategy play there, but still has work to do. And we'll wait and see if he can indeed make it to the finish line. But still out front, there's still Josh Rogers being hounded by Jared Phil Sell. Phil Sell looking to turn number 6. No opportunities through there, unless it's perhaps the last lap and we do have some kind of overlap. This is probably one of the more likely overtaking opportunities, I would say, for Phil Sell, as every lap you can see there visibly just closing meter by meter in the braking zone, and Rogers' car does not look quite as settled. We've seen it bunny hop a little bit with the rear tyres into there, so not as settled for the TTL car, but very good through this last little section of corners, and Phil Sell can't make any time as he dips 2-wheel into the dirt.
Yeah, well, Phil Sell could just be sizing him up in certain areas and figuring out where the best place to do it actually is, because it's one thing to get up to the back of another car, but then to actually be able to find a place that you can do something with it is something else entirely. And you really don't want to mess up that opportunity, because if you do, you may not end up on the back of that car again if you use up too much of your tire, or you overheat it and you drop back even a second or so, and then you can't make it back. There's not enough time left in the race, so he's thinking about all that right now. No, he's almost gone. He just took a little bit too much entry curb onto 4 there, and almost just lost it completely. So very, very quick hands from Jared Filsell. But, you know, as I was just saying, he's now lost that opportunity up behind Rogers now. And is he going to be able to claw that back? Because these guys are very, very close in terms of times. If they're running similar to what they have been recently, I mean, it could take him 4 or 5 laps to get back up as close as he was.
Yeah, absolutely. He's lost the slipstream down to up to 1.1 seconds the gap at the moment. And Rogers was quicker last time around. Of course, Filsell was perhaps impeded by Rogers a little bit on that outlap. But Rogers was very, very fast last time around and is being able to apply the pressure quite a lot to Filsell behind, because at this point, as Filsell does not get the optimal exit out of the final corner, gap goes to 1.2 seconds. The pressure is all on Filsell's shoulders now, because Rogers can run his own pace, and like you say, with how close these guys are, that pace might just be enough to hold him off. So Filsell really has to dig deep and try and pull something out of the bag here to make this work.
Yeah, and we've only got 11 laps to go, so, I mean, you know, these guys have been trading times generally that are within about a 1/10 of each other. So Jared would have to win a 1/10 in his favor each lap for the next 11 laps just to make up that gap. So he's going to have to really rely now on Josh Rogers making a mistake or making many minor mistakes in order to make up that gap. And with what we've seen with Josh's driving this year, I mean, in all disciplines, in V8s, in iRacing, in the World Championship Grand Prix Series, in the World Championship GT Series, he's been pretty flawless. So we'll have to see if he does succumb to anything. But yeah, Jared Filsell definitely has a lot of work to do now.
And there's definitely a lot of pressure on at the front, but there's also a lot of pressure from number 14 at the moment, as Carl Stokes, who did walk away with the Super Split 2 race win last time out, is trying to apply some pressure to the back of David Kinman. And of course, Stokes has been in a little bit of issues in this race. He did find himself back to one point, but he does have a very nice opportunity heading into the corkscrew right now, as Kinman takes a very defensive line, which might compromise him a bit on the exit, but does very nicely to make things work. As we're just seeing Jordan Ross going very, very slowly on the circuit. In fact, he's looped it. He's been hit by Thomas McMillan, but I think that was more to do with Jordan Ross on the power too early, lit it up, and McMillan was just in the wrong place, wrong time, and had nowhere to go, and unfortunately turned around the Synergy Sim Racing driver even quicker. But I think Ross was already going around, so no blame to McMillan, but a big shame for Jordan Ross, who has been very impressive of late, putting in some very good performances lately, and unfortunately a lot of hard work in this race being undone.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Also, that Brett Loxton actually almost looped it as he was trying to get past McMillan after that little transaction as well. So Brett's been having a pretty quiet race, actually. He's up in position number 7 right now, and he's definitely up there in the championship at the moment and looking to move himself forward. And Thomas McMillan could just be a little bit rattled by what's happened there. You can see just getting a very tight exit out of the corkscrew there. But Thomas McMillan's been having a good drive too, up there in position number 6. Usually we'd see him around there, or maybe even sometimes a lot lower, or sometimes a little higher. Hasn't had the most consistent drive this year, so good to see him up in position number 6. But I've also noticed that Riley Blythe has been doing a really fantastic job of catching up to the group ahead of him. I said earlier that he had a 10-second disadvantage to those guys. Well, that has dropped dramatically. It's only about 2 seconds now, and he'll be looking to get past those guys of Kyle Stokes and David Kinman up ahead of him in just a couple of laps.
Yep, well, last time around it was 7/10 of a second. This time around, it's going to be 8/10 of a second to Kyle Stokes and 7 to David Kinman. So Riley Blythe just absolutely hammering out the laps at the moment, doing a fantastic job in that Evolution Racing Team car. And Riley, I've got to say, I think a lot of this lap time is down to the fact you're not using purple rims today. I think you should keep the black rims. Trust me, it's faster. But at the moment, Kyle Stokes still not able to find a way past David Kinman. As commentators jinx, David Kinman gets 2 wheels into the dirt and loses a little bit of time, but Stokes just not able to find a way past. And it is a very difficult circuit to set up an overtake, Zach, because there are so many fast corners that lead into an overtaking spot, and fast corners are not where you want to set up a move.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, with these V8 supercars, the aerodynamic effect that they have is not as great as other cars that we might see. For those of you who are familiar with watching Formula One, you'll know that all that dirty air makes it very difficult to overtake, and it's no different in these V8 supercars, although the effect is probably not as great as you would have on a Formula One, but it still nonetheless does not help. And it's also very difficult when you're tucked up right behind a car like that to be able to see your braking markers or even the corner apex, and all those things add up and can mean that you might even just lose half of a tenth through one corner, but that's half of a tenth that you really need to make that overtake. And Kyle Stokes has been doing everything that he can the last few corners to try and make a move on David Kinman there. Kinman going for the defensive line in the center of the track and saying, Kyle Stokes, hey mate, you're going to have to go around the long way if you want to get past me. And that's going to cause Riley Blythe to gain even more time on this as well. So, I mean, if I was Kyle Stokes right now, I'd probably just wait out for a second, let Riley Blythe through pretty easily, and probably try and follow him through as he gets past Kinman. But I'm not in the driver's seat right now, and Kyle probably can't hear me, so he's going to do the best that he can from where he's sitting, and he is looking very quick compared to Kinman in front of him right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The car looks very settled on Kyle Stokes compared to Kinman as they go through the fast turn number 6 once again. Gap out front, 1.9 seconds, so Rogers still holding out on that lead and was faster last time around, as Kinman once again taking a very defensive line through the corkscrew, a bit of over-rotation through the middle of that corner as well. Not ideal, and that allows Kyle Stokes to get ever closer as he tries to set up a great move into turn number 1 again, because last time around he had a fantastic drive out of this final corner and his car looks so good through this section. But he does have to be careful, as you say. Riley Blythe well and truly in this battle now. Kyle Stokes doesn't quite get the run he would want this time around, but neither does Riley Blythe. But now the slipstream effect does come into play, and he edges ever closer. We've seen him be very strong on the brakes. Will he try it down the inside? He thinks about it, locks up a little bit, and just about pulls it up for turn number 1, but no moves made. And Riley Blythe now well and truly in this battle pack.
Yeah, and I feel like Riley Blythe's probably going to try and overtake in a more technical part of the track, because that's probably where he's going to be carrying most of his speed compared to these guys. They've all got the same amount of ponies under the bonnet, as Kinman just runs a little wide on the exit of 4, and now this is where Riley Blythe's going to try and make it all work. He might get Kinman as he follows through Stokes up the inside here, and I think that Kinman will have to bail out of this one for the kink, although Riley's going to play it very safe, and he's going to go for the really nice exit and try to do both of them in one go. Going to just use a little bit of the gravel on the left-hand side, but that's no problem for Riley Blythe. Fires it down the inside of the corkscrew. Kyle Stokes goes in deep, though, and holds it on the outside and then the inside, and he's going to manage to take that position. But Riley Blythe managing to get past Kinman, and I think that now he'll have a little bit... Yeah, he's got a nicer run through that corner there, and he'll now use this opportunity to set him up for the inside at the final corner, and job done for Riley Blythe. He'll use the horses under that Ford to maintain that inside line, and I don't think that Kyle Stokes will really be able to challenge him around the outside here at turn 1. Very valiant effort if he does, but I think you just have to run a little too wide there to really make anything work.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that Blythe gets the job done, and Stokes does slot back in behind there. It's going to get very close in a T number 3, but not quite. One battle that is slowly beginning to shape up, though, is for the podium position. Sam Blacklock slowly coming under pressure from Wayne Burke, who is just catching little by little over the last few laps, and Thomas McMillan stops in the middle of the circuit.
Yeah.
Very, very close. A car almost went into the back there. In fact, he found himself backwards, all done by himself, running wide through turn number 6. Found a bump. Jordan Ross finds himself off for a second time as well. So everything happening. Jordan Ross found himself off at the corkscrew. So a lot of drivers in this top half of the field all of a sudden beginning to crack under pressure with just 7 laps to go, almost 6 laps to go now. So drivers really struggling potentially with tyres, potentially with the track conditions, and John Ross is going to have pressure from Jacob Knight behind. McMillan will get himself into a bit of clean air, but not without the loss of a lot of positions.
Yeah, that was very interesting there. He just ran wide through that left-hand kink as you start coming up the hill, and it is a very difficult corner, it does have to be said. And just getting on the grass there, and I think that Jordan was probably trying to keep an eye on, there was a car that was, it was Benjamin Smith who had gone off when he was trying to avoid McMillan in the road, and he was actually cutting across the corkscrew, and maybe just a little bit of a distraction for Jordan Ross there, causing him to lock up and nearly take into the back of, I think that was Cooper Webster, who he was battling with at the time. So Webster managed to make it through unscathed, and we will now take you to that battle for third, which we were just starting to tell you about, as Wayne Burke has been putting in some very nice laps. Last time around, they were trading lap times and they were within a tenth of each other. So Wayne does have the preferred position. He's taken preferred position if you're trying to overtake, at least. And he's taken out 2/10 on Blacklock on that last lap. Now, remember that Blacklock did give a little bit of a old hip and shoulder to old mate Burke as he came through, and Burke might be looking to return the favor if he can catch him with 4 laps remaining.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll wait and see if there's any redemption to be had for Wayne Burke. Of course, these two have raced before, and there has been contact in the past. They don't mind getting the elbows out to race one another, and earlier in this race was just another chapter in that. So a bit of a rivalry perhaps between these two, as Blacklock does get into the dirt just a little bit on the exit of turn number 6, which is such a hard corner, as you did mention. We have seen some casualties of that before, as Wayne Burke so late on the brakes into the corkscrew there and makes up a lot of time. But the issue is he has to make up time a little bit more rapidly. 4 laps still on the clock, but he has to get himself into a position where he can start making out where Sam Blacklock's car is a lot weaker than his, where his advantages are, where his strengths are, and really work out where he can potentially set up a move on the final lap, penultimate lap, whatever it might be. But he has to start taking time out a little bit more, as Blacklock does a 23-1, and it is matched by Wayne Burke.
Yeah, well, both those guys lapping within 9 or 11 thousandths of each other, pardon me, which is very impressive. But so he's not going to be able to get past in that amount of time. But we're going to go now to Kinmond, who's right back up on Kyle Stokes again. And these guys have been battling it out for the last few laps, and of course had it mixed up a little bit as Riley Blythe, faster car, was coming through before. So Kinman looking to get past Kyle Stokes, but Stokes has been looking very strong in this last to first section of the lap, getting some nice traction out of the final corner there as he comes down into turn number 1, very late and hard on the brakes, just kissing the first apex, running a little wide, and then coming back in for that second one very, very nicely. So not going to be troubled this time around by Kinman, but these guys have been dueling for the last couple of laps, and with high intensity, we have seen a lot of drivers making mistakes. So with only a few to go, maybe the pressure's starting to build and one of these guys will take a fall, but hopefully not, because they've been having a great scrap for P number 15 and 16. And we've actually got a few lapped cars, a few more than I would have expected, but only 3 retirements as of yet. Benjamin J. Smith, who I think cutting through the, or having to avoid McMillan and cutting through the corkscrew was enough for him. Scott Larnack and Corey Preston have retired as well. And we'll go now to McMillan, who is coming up on the back of Brian Borg. So Brian Borg, a driver who's probably, he's sitting there in P number 10, so he's doing fairly well for himself up there, but McMillan obviously had a spin and wants to make up time, but Borg is a good, fast driver, and he's not afraid to defend, as we have seen many times, including last week at Silverstone, where he was getting up in the thick of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Borgie not afraid to defend, but unfortunately for him, Thomas McMillan not afraid to attack either, as we have seen in this race. Always willing to give it a crack, and we saw in Scops, and even pre-qualifying for Scops, that Thomas McMillan really loves this circuit, knows how to get a car around here quick. Unfortunately, this race just hasn't played into his hands and made a mistake or two, but perhaps he could walk away with top 10 at the end of this race. But that all depends on if he can find a way past Brian Borg, who closed that gap down as Borg gets a little bit of oversteer on the exit of turn number 6. Very easy to do, but does hold still a healthy margin for now. But Macmillan, with that very nice pace in this later stage of the race, could potentially bring that gap down, but not close enough this time around as we head to 2 laps to go. Wayne Burke still not able to make enough of inroads on Sam Blacklock, only 1/10 of a second gained, but the gap still stands at a bit over 6/10 of a second, so no chance of a move just yet, unless there is any issue for fuel for Sam Blacklock. But that shouldn't be the case, as he actually was in the pit lane 1.5 seconds longer than Wayne Burke. So a lot of fuel on board that Trans-Tasman racing car, or perhaps too little for Wayne Burke, who we have seen do it quite late. But Steve Jansen at the moment, actually in a battle with Jordan Pruden in the West End Mazda car, or at least half-sponsored car, as they're going to fire their way side by side into the final corner now. And Pruden tries to block off the exit for Jansen, as these guys fought their way all the way down from the exit of the corkscrew. So getting very, very brave in this battle in the dying laps, and are really going all out to try and secure this position 17 as Jansen dives to the inside and somehow stops the car, just about makes the apex, a little bit of contact there, as well as Steve Jansen manages to wrestle it away from Jordan Pruden. What a fantastic scrap this has been for the last half a lap, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. Very nice move there from Jansen. He was very late under brakes, almost felt a little bit Ricardo-esque there, and he gets very taily trying to use all the track as he comes out of turn number 4. He wants to make a little bit of a gap before the end of this race so that he doesn't have to worry about Pruden behind, because, yeah, that was a big move down at turn 1, and if he can't do it again, well, it's not going to work out for him. But we will jump back up to Blacklock and Burke, because Burke has been doing a very good job. He's closed in another 2/10 of a second, and the gap is now only 4/10. As there's an accident ahead of them, they're both going to have to go right, and that's actually going to help out Wayne Burke, because Burke's going to have a nicer run through this corner. But yeah, that was a big off for Pete Walsh there.
Yep, and all by himself, and that was a very hard, vicious impact as he goes right into the concrete wall there. And that's a shame, because he was running very strong up in P13 at the time, but unfortunately it's not going to be a P13 finish, as we do have Sam Blacklock trying to defend into the corkscrew, but it's not going to be enough right now for Wayne Burke. Can't make anything happen. Have to turn our attention though to the number 2 car, and he started P number 2, but he's not going to finish P number 2. Josh Rogers, he won round number 1 for the highest strength of field we've seen so far this season, and he's going to win round number 5 as well, as he actually runs into the pit wall, his only mistake of the race. Otherwise a flawless race from Josh Rogers, as he makes a massive slide through turn number 1. And Jared Filsell.
Oh, Burke's come through! But yeah, Burke gave a hip and shoulder. He did return the favour in the end of the final. And Wayne Burke is going to come home ahead of Sam Blacklock. Fantastic little bit of driving there from Wayne. We'll get a Cut Price Racing replay of that for you, because that was a very cheeky little move there from Wayne. He was way back and was very late on the brakes, and decided that he was going to use Sam as a bit of a stopping mechanism there, and got some nice traction as he came out and came over the line ahead. So Wayne Burke did end up paying that favor in the end.
Always a little bit of excitement, a little bit of controversy in this Monday night V8 Supercar Series. What a series it is. Action from every turn, and I well and truly thought the podium was sorted, but it always comes down to the final corner in this series. Such a fantastic series, and if you do like that, be sure to subscribe to the iRacing Esports Network. Be sure to give the video a like as well, as we'll run our way through the race results, and it will be Josh Rogers walking away with the win ahead of Jared Filsell and an opportunistic Wayne Burke, who did get redemption on Sam Blacklock in the end after an earlier incident. Blacklock demoted to P number 4 with Stuart Vaughan getting a top 5, a fantastic result for the brand new TTL Esports recruit. Brett Loxton brings it home in P number 6 for car number 6. And Cooper Webster brings it home in P number 7 ahead of Forzen Alnabi, Adam Highland, and Jordan Ross, your top 10.
Yeah, Brian Borg did well, up 3 positions into 11th, followed by McMillan. Came home 12th after that spin in the later stages of the race. Jacob Knight moving himself up 7 spots into 13th position, with Riley Blythe finishing in 14th after a couple of troubles for him early on in the race. Kyle Sturks stayed 15th. David Kimman did well, moving up to 16th position. Steve Jansen in 17th. Jordan Pruden in 18th. Christian Hinton moved up into 19th. And Dominic Savicki 20th. Then we had Will Dodd in 21st, Matthew Deere in 22nd, and Brendan Jackson in 23rd. Then we had the first of our cars a lap down: Jason Cossey, Shane Rayner, Damon Mulqueen, Philip Piggott, and Martin Casey, all lap down. And then our non-finishers, unfortunately, Pete Walsh with that savage exit at with 2 laps to go there, Ben Smith and Scott Larnack and Corey Preston calling it much earlier in the race as well.
Yep, so there we go. 28 laps of Laguna Seca once again turns it on. Always an exciting finish in this series, in this race. And it's going to be a fantastic run to the end as Josh Rogers gets his 2nd win of the season. Would be nice to see him come out a few more times and really challenge Phil Lascelles for that championship lead, which he currently holds. But he doesn't hold the championship lead on the event we will be hosting tomorrow. It's the Australian Sprint Car Championship kicking off tomorrow, round number 3 at Williams Grove. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to get muddy, and it is going to get exciting. The features always turn it on in that series. And then on Wednesday night here on V8 Online, we have the Geodesic Racing Sprint Series Australia, round number 2 at Montreal. And just for a second, Zach, take off your V8 Online hat, put on your Ultra C Sports hat. You had a bit of a rough race last time out. Are you looking for redemption this time out?
Oh yeah, big time. I think we got a little bit more work to do on the setup. Don't really know where we are speed-wise at the moment, but we had a very good showing last time at Interlagos. Pace was good, car was good. Strategy was not good. I think you actually picked a better strategy than I did, Bo. But you know, that's what happens with these league races, and I actually really enjoy that. So yeah, we'll go out on Wednesday night and hopefully we'll be at the front of the grid. But yeah, it's going to be a great race to watch. I know there are a few safety cars last time, but you know, that's what happens, I guess, when you have 40, 50 odd drivers who probably haven't raced against each other in a really long time. So hopefully we're all more attuned to each other for this next race on Wednesday, and we'll have an absolute cracker show to put on for everyone.
Yep, absolutely. And then after that, we do have the weekend off, which will be very, very nice. But then on the Monday afterwards, we will have round number 6 of this series kicking off once again. And it's going to be the fantastic Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari. And if that is confusing to you, it's Circuit Imola. Always provides a fantastic race, 31 laps, so it's going to be a bit of a longer race. So strategy is well and truly going to be at the forefront, and who will be able to strategize their way to the front of the field. This is the iRacing Esports Network with V8 Online broadcasting the Monday night official V8 Supercar Series. I'm Bo Albert on behalf of Zach Hanlon in the commentators booth and Jay Kennedy in the director's booth. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
The following is a presentation of the iRacing Esports Network.